that's a very bad sign for them. I do want to play a little bit of devil's advocate today because I think we often, I think both of us feel like Joe Biden is doing well right now just because of the president's handling of coronavirus, the mistakes that he's made. He is not in a strong position right now. But the one thing I will say is if there was going to be a year where the polls were really wildly off, where they don't account for factors that are sort of unforeseen, different than the pollsters have tried to now account for the fact that white working class individuals were undercounted in the polls last time around. That sort of skewed things, not by a wild amount, by the way, by a couple points, but it was in key states, and that's what made the difference. So they've tried to account for that. But look, we're in this pandemic. Voting is unfolding in a way that we've never had before. We have this insane early vote. We have way more mail-in ballots. A lot of legal questions. There's actually a Supreme Court ruling yesterday impacting good for Democrats in Pennsylvania. This ruling that would allow mail-in ballots to be counted for a couple extra days as long as they're postmarked by election days. But all of these decisions are happening and unfolding in states across the country. So if the turnout model is a little off in a significant way in Trump's favor, if a significant number of mail-in ballots gets tossed just because it's a little more onerous and this is a lot of people's first time voting by mail, they may screw it up, that starts to put things back into play. So again, look, do I think that's what's going to happen? No, I don't. I think Joe Biden has a significant enough lead that even if a few balls bounce in the opposite direction, he still is in a commanding position to try to win. But if there was ever going to be a year when things would be not just a tiny bit off, but wildly off, it would be this year.
It's certainly possible. Look, I mean, what happened in 2016? It was a confluence of events across 3 states, several different contributing factors. So that certainly could happen again this time around. There's a huge level of uncertainty in the number of voting. As you point to, mail-in ballots. If you look at GOP registration numbers, they're actually quite good across every single battleground state in some cases.
That's what the Biden campaign is pointing to,
That's what they're pointing to. You can see their registration. You can also go and you can look at the personal enthusiasm amongst voters. Now, some of this is spin, but, there's a grain of truth whenever you look at the amount of affirmative votes that are going towards Donald Trump. And Biden is just gone. Like, he's missing, right? Like, the guy's he's not even going to be seen until Thursday. He's just taken several days off the campaign trail.
It's prepping for the debates,
probably,
what they say.
Yeah, it's prepping for the debates. Okay. So you look and you can see this in many different ways. If it was going to happen, it would happen, I think, from increased turnout amongst Latino voters in a place like Florida, then things getting tight, polls being wrong in North Carolina, in Arizona, Nevada, and elsewhere, and then you only need Pennsylvania, or you need Michigan, was one of the combinations of the two in order to go the right way. So he has a path to victory, and I think Nate Silver keeps saying this as well. He's like, look, I put it at 15%. But that's still high. I mean, if you had a 50% chance of dying, you'd be like taking pretty seriously, right?
Right.
And so that's kind of how you should look at it.
Yeah, I think that's even a 1 in 10 chance.
Yeah, that's high.
I think about what would I pay to keep my kids from having a 1 in 10 bad outcome. I would give everything that I had, right? So it's still definitely a chance. He is not 100% out of this race.
I completely agree with the sentiments provided here. I think a lot of people are in for a big surprise in terms of this election. Millions of people are going to be rude awakening. I thought that Donald Trump was going to win. Biden wins. I don't think anyone's going to win by a landslide, but I think the winner might not be who you think it is. Maybe the Biden supporters. I was looking at the polls. I was so sure that Biden was going to win. Look at the polls. And then Biden loses. Because there's so many unknowns, so many variables to look at. And you got to also consider Donald Trump is doing a lot of significant, shady, behind the scenes efforts to rig this election. And he even has a plan set up that even if the rigging and trickery that he's doing fails, he has a backup plan, right? In spite of Donald Trump's attempts to focus our attention on mail-in ballot fraud, right? The reality is the most significant effects that I've seen that can affect the election in terms of trickery is coming from Trump. I mean, they're doing the classic, what I call lying with the truth. They're pointing out that mail-in ballot, there's fraud happening. Of course there's fraud happening. Why wouldn't there be? There's fraud happening in person. In fact, much more likely there's more fraud happening in person, which it's easier to do it that way than there is in mail-in ballots. I mean, think about what kind of strategy can you come up with using mail-in ballots that you can significantly impact the election and get away with it. What plan could you come up with? Any plan that would have a significant effect on the election using mail-in ballots is at an extreme level of risk of getting caught and exposed. Because if you start sending in a bunch of phony ballots, right, enough that it's significant to be able to flip the election towards Biden, you're going to risk raising so many red flags. Because again, every ballot that's sent in is going to be verified based on voter registrations, right? So even the valid mail-in ballots can be tossed or challenged because the signature they look at may not match your signature. So let's say you send in a valid mail-in ballot and you don't realize they're using your driver's license signature, which is an old signature, and your new signature is a little bit different. So a valid mail-in ballot can actually be tossed and fail the authentication process. A valid one. So imagine a phony one. What are the odds that you are going to be able to match the signature of millions of voters illegally, right? I mean, you're talking about random here and there, some kid living with his grandmother, and, you know, it's a grandmother. She doesn't really know what's going on, and he takes the mail, takes the ballot, fills it out for Biden or something, and then uses some signature that he finds and sort of fakes it. Okay, now you've gotten one phony ballot. What is that going to do? I mean, are we honestly talking about the idea that we think there's going to be thousands or millions of people living with their grandmothers that are going to be of the type to think about, let me do this and try to do it? You think that you're going to get significant numbers of these random occurrences, these outliers? So the other approach is you got to find a way that you can somehow, I don't know, somehow you hack a system and you get a list of registered voters, and then you just send these phony ballots in, but you don't know if any of them are actually going to vote. So if you send it in and they send it in, then it's going to be like, okay, we got two ballots for the same person. So it gets tossed, it gets questioned, it gets challenged, right? But the thing about it is, in order for mail-in ballot fraud to work, you have to do it at such a scale that would be extremely risky of getting caught, because you're risking sending in thousands or millions of bogus ballots, which a bunch of them are going to get caught. The signatures don't match, or it's a double ballot, or the person's not registered to vote. The real way to significantly rig this election is in the ways that Brad Parscale, for example, has done, targeting millions of minorities, trying to discourage them from voting, right? This is what was exposed right around the same time that Brad Parscale decides to try to kill himself. But again, everything around Trump is coincidence. I'm sure it's a coincidence that this guy goes suicidal just when it gets exposed that he was targeting all of these minority voters, trying to get them to not vote. But you got people like Ben Shapiro, Tim Kass, Crowder, Blaze TV, focused on 9 ballots in a ditch. Guy that said he got 3, there's another story, the guy with 300 ballots supposedly in his car. 300 ballots is nothing, right? But he didn't even have 300. He lied. He actually had 20. So 20, think about how much evidence do you need to realize that this is nothing more than manipulation. If there is a major effort to do mail-in ballot fraud, why on earth would you waste your time pointing out 20 ballots here, 9 ballots in a ditch here, some of which are actually Trump votes, right? You're pointing out a situation where Trump votes get tossed. I'm sorry. The point is they're trying to say the Democrats are cheating. So there were Democrat votes and Trump votes, right? They didn't specifically target Trump votes to throw them out. They threw out some votes that could help Biden. And that's your evidence? And the thing about it is to talk about these things, but not talk about targeting millions of voters to try to get them to not vote. I mean, could you get any more evidence than that Ben Shapiro and Tim Pool, these are bad actors that are trying to manipulate their audience into believing something that may not be true? And again, mail-in ballot fraud is a thing. It's happening. Of course it's happening. In-person ballot fraud is happening. Of course it's happening, right? And then you point out some Democrat saying, oh, suppose a Democrat, I don't know who this guy is, saying, oh, we're willing to lie, cheat, and steal, whatever it takes to win. Of course there's Democrats who are willing to lie, cheat, and steal. There's Republicans willing to lie, cheat, and steal. The fact that you point this out shows how weak of a case you have. That you're willing to point out any little thing like, oh, look, a guy says he wants to. Of course, there's a lot of dishonest people in this country. Why wouldn't there be somebody in this country for both parties that are willing to cheat? But the thing is, what is the relevance of it? Context. This is one guy. What is he doing? Have you uncovered millions of ballots, fraudulent ballots, 50,000 fake ballots, significant numbers? Anyone who's doing something that is to that level of effect with mail-in ballots, they're probably going to get caught. Those are going to be the stories you're going to hear about, busted and caught, right? That's why the ones that people like Project Veritas and Ben Shapiro, the ones they're talking about, they're not talking about ones with charges, right? We've had Republicans recently charged with voter fraud. Ben Shapiro is not talking about it. Tim Pool's not talking about it, right? But he wants to talk about 9 ballots in a ditch. These are the games that are being played. But the point I'm making is, with all this shady stuff going on, regardless of which party, and mail-in ballots being a new thing, the polls, I don't know what's up with the polls, guys. I look at the registrations that are in favor of Republicans in many areas, the passion for getting Trump reelected, the lack of passion for Biden. It's all over the place. So I don't think anyone, whether you are supporting Trump or supporting Biden, should be relaxed. Everyone should be very, very nervous. So the point is, go vote. And I don't think I mentioned this before, but the people that are mail-in voting for the first time, I mean, mistakes are going to be made. I'm sitting here, Mr. Science Guy, and I got my ballot instructions here, and I'm afraid. And it's not that I don't feel I have the capacity to understand how to do this thing, but my fear is the ability of the person who wrote the instructions to write it in a manner that's clear enough that I won't make a mistake. I'm literally afraid I'm going to make a mistake. You got Trump voters sending in naked ballots, forgetting they got to put it in a privacy envelope. I mean, so many factors, guys. This is not a time to be relaxed. This is a time to be very, very nervous for your candidate. Whoever you're voting for, be very, very nervous. There's a lot of cards on the table that are set up for not an October surprise, but a November surprise. Debate me in the comment section below. Click on the like button, subscribe, smash that bell. Be well.